Hi, everyone. We're here today with Gabby Manotoc, who is a Senior Director of Product and Design at Untapped. She's here today to talk to us about how to break into a product design career. We're super excited to have her. So now, for those of you who don't already know what Exponent is, Exponent helps you get your dream tech career with our online courses, expert coaching, peer-to-peer mock interviewing platform, and interview question database. Check it out at tryexponent.com. Okay, thanks so much for being here with us today, Gabby. We love having you here. Would you quickly introduce yourself for our viewers?
Yeah, so as Angelica said, my name is Gabby. I'm the Senior Director of Product and Design at Untapped. It is a HR tech Series C startup, and we're focused on making connections between the right roles and the right candidates, especially those who are underrepresented in tech, so that we can improve diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging all over the tech landscape in the US.
So it seems like you've been pretty successful in your product design career. I'd love to hear how you got into it. What's your path to product design been like so far?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I emigrated to the US about 10 years ago to finish college, and I got a degree in Bachelor of Fine Arts at the Savannah College of Art and Design in Georgia. Based on that, my final thesis and like final project was really book design and print design. So coming out of college in 2015, it was very, very difficult to find a job. I was lucky enough to find a job in New York City at a digital agency called RGA. It's this huge, like 4,000 plus company in New York with multiple offices all over the globe. And I was one of many of hundreds of designers. I worked there. I really owned my craft. I then moved into another agency, but much smaller this time. It was about 30 people total at this time. And then I was one of 5 people in New York. And the way it worked was the 5 of us in New York were really building up the East Coast presence, while the main office was in the Midwest in Chicago. Over time, that was about 4 years. That company grew from 35 people to multiple offices globally again, and with thousands of people, multiple designers, everyone kind of doing a lot of different projects. I decided I wanted to try something completely new. I moved into the startup world, which is what we call in-house, which is working on one product instead of working for multiple customers. I moved to a fintech in New York City. It was about 30 people, very early stage. I was the first designer there. So I was the first designer. I designed the entire product, built up the team. And then I moved to where I am now, which is at Untapped. And we are a Series C company with about 65 people and looking to hire more people.
Okay, awesome. So it seems like you come from a more traditional art education,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
nowadays there's also like a lot of product design boot camps as well. So I wonder
Mm-hmm.
what your opinion is on that. Like, do you necessarily need a more traditional like art college education, or are the boot camps just as effective?
That's also a really good question. And I forgot to mention that after hours, I actually teach at multiple boot camps. So I have experience being a career coach for a boot camp called Springboard. And then now I really focus on a boot camp called Design Lab, where I really teach and mentor folks who are trying to transition into product design. So think of career switchers. You have a career in something else and you want to try product design. There's a really big difference, I think, in terms of if you think of the syllabus and the rubric and the time spent learning product design. So in a traditional art school background, you do 3, 4 years, however long the program is, to really own your skills and own your craft. And in boot camp, which is usually self-directed, most people finish in about 6 months. If you really hustle, you can do 3. And the first difference is really price. So if you're thinking at an art school, when I went to school, it was $50,000, $60,000 a year for 4 years. So that's a lot of money. It's a lot of investment. And if you want to do that, you got to be really sure that that's the money you want to invest in. Boot camps, on the other hand, are a couple thousand, and it's mostly self-directed. I think the second difference is really the structure of the way you learn. So if you were coming from a traditional art school like myself, you come in and come out with a very structured way of thinking. So over 4 years, this is the thing you focus on for the first year, the second year, the third year, and the fourth year. And that's, pretty straightforward. It's based on kind of what the industry has been teaching for a long time. I'd say there's a reason I came out with a fine art degree in print design, even if the UX role was coming up. I think if I was in a boot camp, it would have been focused solely on UX. On the boot camp side, it's a very, very short and sort of condensed syllabus, and it's mostly self-directed. So if you are someone who is able to manage your own time really well, kind of work with maybe more ambiguous or open-ended type questions, and really kind of be proactive in your learning, I think that's the right fit for you. I've seen a lot of people succeed at boot camps just because they want to hustle, they work really hard, they're often looking beyond sort of what's given to them on this online course, and they do really well and they find jobs really well. I think in terms of finding a job, the challenge that folks will find between those two is if you are coming from an art school, you definitely have a stronger sense of your hard skills. You have really good visual design skills. If you are coming from a boot camp, you often have professional maturity. If you're a career switcher, you know what it's like to work on teams. You know what it's like to manage your own time. You know how to ask your boss for feedback, and you know how to work kind of cross-functionally. And I think that's your strength. So whichever side you're coming from, knowing that, you need to be able to play to the other side and be able to answer interview questions about, your hard skills or maybe your professional maturity. And I think it's just awareness, most of all. And you can be equally successful with both. It depends on who you are and kind of your strengths and weaknesses as a person.
Yeah, and I love your point about the professional maturity, that somebody who's coming out of a boot camp has worked in previous other industries before.
Mm-hmm.
So, like for you, like you've had a variety of work too. You've worked in both agencies and in
Mm-hmm.
the in-house setting as well. So I'd love to hear
Mm-hmm.
more about the difference between the two.
Yeah, that's a great question. And people ask me all the time. I think, well, one, I'm really grateful that I started on the agency side because you have a lot of projects and you have a lot of customers. So as a up and coming designer, I had a great opportunity to really jump between different projects and different types of product design and see what I would like. So did I like website design? Did I like mobile design? Did I like customers in healthcare, for example? Or did I like customers in finance? So I got to try all those things out. On the startup side, I think, or in-house, the difference is you are really committed to one thing. So you can see your work go through multiple iterations. And it's kind of like your baby. So over the course of years, you see what it looked like in version 1 and in version 10. And you miss that a little on the agency side. So on one hand, on the agency side, you have extreme flexibility to grow and change and kind of be a little bit indecisive about where you want to focus on. And on the startup side, you need to be really bought in. And it's really hard to find a place that you're completely bought in and you're engaged 100% of the time, 365 days of the year.
Oh yeah, that sounds really intense. So it kind of sounds like the startup side gives you more ownership versus the agency side gives you more diversity. Is that right?
Exactly. And I think it depends on where you are in your career. I definitely have a lot of friends who love the agency side. I personally love the startup side. But I still enjoyed what I experienced. And I think it just depends on, where you want to grow in your growth areas personally.
Gotcha. Okay, that's a really good tip. And so it also sounds like the positions that you've been in, or the companies that you've been at, also varied in size. So would you say there are also differences between working at a big company versus a small one?
Yeah, I'd say at a big company, you have a lot of support. So you have a lot of other people that you can ask for feedback, ask for advice, get a lot of mentorship, and really kind of own in on your craft. So being a really, really good individual contributor, that's what you get. But if the smaller in the company, the less support you have, but also the more ownership. So it's kind of an index of support versus ownership. And so I found later in my career, it was a better match to be in a smaller company where I had a lot of ownership because I had already built up all my skills and had a lot of experience building up my craft. And I could now kind of run with it and be really, really good at design and start playing around with different things like research or product management or even just people management skills in general.
Yeah, okay. That sounds like so much fun. And speaking of being an individual contributor, then,
Yeah.
so it sounds like you have the option of being an individual contributor, or you can also move into management at your stage. So
Mm-hmm.
can you tell us a little bit about like the differences and some things that you should consider when you're trying to decide which path to go down?
Yeah. So for context, I am now a people manager and I have been for at least 3 years. And I manage about 7 people.
Wow.
And I've managed people from like junior to senior to lead and all of those things. And there was a point when I definitely considered continuing to be an individual contributor. And the value of today's industry is that a lot of companies are creating paths for being a very, very senior individual contributor where you get paid the same as like a director because your impact is the same, just in a different way. I'd
Oh,
say as an individual contributor, what you're really thinking about is you have to love your craft and like you want to just be like in the top 1% of people who can design. Or the top 1% of people who can do research, for example. And it's kind of the same in all facets of tech. But if you were a superstar individual contributor, that's kind of your path. And in terms of ownership and impact, you're given like the meatiest problems of the business and you're in charge of executing that. If you are on the people management side, which is kind of where I am, you have to be really good at multitasking. So I'm often juggling multiple things at once, and I'm really energized by that. So I'm energized by having 5 different projects that maybe I'm not executing, but at the end of the day, I'm responsible for making sure everyone has the resources they need to execute on that. So on one hand, you're a supporter, on the other side, you're kind of leading the charge from the front. So I think that's a difference.
Okay, gotcha. And so that's for like later stages of the career, once you've already like made it into product design
Mm-hmm.
and there for a
Yeah.
while. What about for people who are just starting out and they're early on in their career? When you first started out, what did you do to stand out to apply for your first product design role?
That's a great question. I think to stand out, and even when I hire today, one of the biggest things that makes a product designer great, not just good, is their ability to communicate impact, specifically business impact. What did you do on this project? And how did the project make the business better? And I think that's often lacking. So when I studied in art school, or a lot of the people that I see coming out from boot camps now, they might be very good at creating a beautiful mobile app, for example, or designing a really great checkout experience. But when I ask them and I have to dig kind of for the so what, like, so what did this do? It's a great experience, but does it matter if no one uses it? Being able to articulate that and make me really impressed. And that's how you stand out. And that's something I learned very early on, where it doesn't ultimately matter how beautiful the design is, it's how effective it is. And as a designer, you have to be willing to sometimes say, design A looked better, but design B was more impactful. Therefore, design B is actually the better design, regardless of aesthetics, regardless of how beautiful the UI looks.
I love that. So it seems like you also have to have a strong sense of user intuition as well.
Yeah, it's user intuition, and then also some understanding of like metrics or success criteria. I'd say maybe less metrics early on in your career. It's pretty hard to do that as a designer, but just sort of like success criteria. Did users love this? Did you achieve the goal? Did more people use the button now that you've redesigned it? Kind of questions like that are just things to think about as you're working through a problem.
Gotcha. And do you have any tips on how people can figure out how to ask the right types of questions to elicit this type of business impact or user intuition focused thinking?
Yeah, I think the best thing is to really, every time you're about to start a new design, let's say you're early in your career, the first thing you have to think of is the goal, not necessarily the solution. And I wish I had this, idea or like feedback, but throughout my career, I've generally learned that if you have 100%, let's say you have 100% of time devoted on one project, you should be spending 80% of your time thinking about the problem and 20% of the time executing on the solution. And that ability to kind of know that, okay, I'm a designer. My main love and what motivates me is the solution part. But to get to a really good solution, you have to spend a lot more time thinking about what is the goal and really digging in there. And training your brain to do that is going to make you a really, really great designer and allow you to move up very quickly because you set yourself apart.
That's a really incisive insight. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a lot of Exponent users who are just starting out. And so I'm curious, like, if you have any tips for them on how to prepare like a really strong portfolio for product design jobs.
Yeah. So product design, unlike other sort of tech careers, is really based on work you've already done, not really your potential to do work for the company because you have a portfolio. So a lot of time you're judged and you're assessed based on the things you already have, and you're not often there, before you make it to the interview stage. In the early stages, you just kind of throw a link out into the universe, and if someone likes it without you explaining or zero context, that will get you in the door. I think for a portfolio, the thing to know is different companies want different things, so it's really, really hard to give like, these are tips 1, 2, 3, you'll immediately get a job. But some of the things that I look for is, again, it's kind of the ability to communicate in that format. So when you're in a website and you're looking at someone's website, you have to remember that a hiring manager like me, I'm scrolling incredibly quickly. I have maybe 2 or 3 minutes per person to look through and assess your portfolio. If you have blocks of text, I'm probably not going to read it, and you're probably diluting the impact of your work. So you got to find the balance between show me really, really good visuals, and then also show me some amount of context so I understand what you're doing. And I think the biggest sort of downfall of product designers is either their portfolio is too short, where it's just 5 images, or it's too long and it's a novel. And you got to find the in between. The best way, I think, to do that is get a lot of feedback and reach out to people in your network or reach out to other designers and say, like, hey, if I sent you this in 2 minutes, could you tell me what my project was about? That's a really good barometer for if you're starting to get into product design, to know that balance of just enough context, but not too long that you're overwhelming someone.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially if it's somebody in your network who is not necessarily well versed with what you work on, so they have a pair of fresh eyes to take a look
Yeah.
at. Yeah. Okay. So then let's say now you have a really strong portfolio, you've gotten an initial interview. So what about any tips for doing really well in the interviews?
Yeah. My number one tip is relax. I think I've interviewed a lot of people, and I've been on the other side where I'm the one being interviewed. And I think my most memorable interviews are when I can really tell a person is a person and a human being. I think coming across as, you're in a creative career, coming across as overly formal often doesn't read very well. It also makes it very hard to know how you would fit and work with a team, especially because designers often have to move between different solutions and they're kind of loose, and they have to be able to try different and new things that other people haven't thought of. So I think from just like how you show up with your soft skills, just being relaxed, taking a deep breath. And it's also okay if you need a second to pause and think of an answer before you kind of just pummel through and give like a very scripted sounding answer. I think those are the biggest things once you get an interview. And then another tip I would give is definitely to ask a lot of questions, because I think a big downfall is for anyone, whether product design or not, but in my experience interviewing product designers, if you don't ask questions, I don't get that innate sense of curiosity about solving a problem or understanding sort of intentionally what it is you have to do at a job. And I think most hiring managers are open books, and we want to give you information. We want to make you feel welcome here. So don't be afraid to ask questions.
Right. Yeah. And that shows that you really care about what you're working on too, that you're passionate and are interested.
Yeah, absolutely. Design is all about passion. I mean, you're building things for other people. That's a pretty selfless career. So you want to like really care about who you're designing for, where you're working, so that you're motivated to do the best you can for those people.
Yeah. And that's like a great sell for being in product design as a whole, so I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've gotten a lot of really helpful tips from you today. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to everybody watching. We hope that this helps with your next interview. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons below to let us know that this video is valuable for you. And of course, check out hundreds more videos just like this at tryexponent.com. Thanks for watching, and good luck on your upcoming interview.